But so many gifts for our 250th anniversary, every bit of news is better than the last. In this video, there will be a story about the speech of the mayor of New York at the 250th anniversary of the USA, Trump's speech, the takeover of the Democratic Party by Marxists, as well as the huge troubles that are coming down on the governor of California. Well, I mean, every bit of news is better than the last. Really, I don't even know where to start. A terrible blow to the Democrats. And then another one. An even more terrible one. They still haven't realized they've been blindsided. They haven't even figured out yet that they've been hit on the head, and just how hard that blow turned out to be. I congratulate all my acquaintances who are members and supporters of the Democratic Party of the United States of America. Now they've been hit over the head with a dusty sack. Why? Twice. Now let me explain what I just said here. Let's talk about Newsom. So he's impossibly sweet and at the same time a petty thief. Of course, he's also a favorite of women and lobbyists, and it's not even clear who loves him more. We already talked about this yesterday, but some new, wonderful details have come up. So I'm going to repeat some things, but with more details. A mole was planted at the highest level of the California government. For gathering like a hyper, well, it's just honey for my throat and nose. So, a mole to gather evidence of possible criminal activity by California Governor Gavin Newsom and his wife Jennifer Siebel Newsom. Well, isn't that just wonderful, right? When all this came out and it turned out that the mole was recording the most secret conversations of the governor's inner circle, the Democrats went on the attack. Because the best defense is a good offense, accusing President Trump of a politically motivated witch hunt. So they admitted that they are witches, when in fact the case was started and the mole was, as they say, signed up before Trump became the 47th president. In other words, it was the Biden administration that caught Newsom, and they hated him just as much, if not more, than the Republicans did. But the Republicans don't like Gavin, they just don't like him. They slightly despise him and don't like him. And the competing Democrats hate him. Well, just like Biden hated his distant aunt, whom you all know. Her name is Nancy Pelosi. Well, they are distantly related, but she is affectionately referred to as Newsom's distant aunt. That's what they call her. I'll tell you some new and amazing information. Absolutely incredible. And the details of what was happening and continues to happen in the Democratic camp, which today is torn apart by hatred for the socialists, but not at all for the reasons why you don't like socialists. They don't dislike socialists for that reason, but because the socialists are taking power away from them. They were so afraid of Trump, but it turned out that their own people are devouring them from within. So those who are used to having power feel that they might lose it. And besides that, there are also terrible scandals that could undermine any chance for the Democrats to rise to the top and, at the very least, to hold on to their position, and maybe even advance all their ideas about making money in 2026 and 2028. But we'll get to that later. But for now, let's discuss creeping socialism, also called Marxism or fascism in the United States. We couldn't even imagine that we would say these words. Marxism in the USA, socialism in New York, fascism in Washington. But probably if you poke at a computer for a million years, eventually, as one of the Soviet critics said, I mean literary critics, not critics of the Soviet Union, War and Peace will get typed out if you poke at it for a million years. Of course, that's one of the most idiotic statements I've ever heard in my life, but at least the claim that a broken clock shows the correct time twice a day is true. I've checked it many times. It can be correct on odd days, on even days, and even in a leap year. In other words, it happens twice a day. And of course, there will definitely be a cherry on top. The cherry on top will definitely be at the end, which will clearly show you what happens when socialists take over a city, a country, an island, it doesn't matter what. Really. Well, even if it's sugar or whatever it's called, right? What we know for sure, 100% will happen for sure, 100% if the socialists take over sugar. Well, all right. You'll find out after if someone doesn't know. Then we'll deal with both sides of the same coin. That is Montaigne and Newsom. From my point of view, these are two sides of the same cheap coin. Montaigne and Newsom. So now to the most remarkable story of our turbulent times, about how bold socialists have surged to the forefront of American politics. Just 10 years ago, the Democratic Socialists of America, DSA as they're called, right, was an organization known only to specialists in the history of American leftist movements. Founded in 1982 by the merger of two, rather weak socialist groups. One was called the Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee. The other was the New American Movement. So this DSA remained, a sort of club for decades. Yes, with just a few thousand members across America, without any real influence or any weight in elections. But there was a turning point in 2016, because if you keep sowing in schools, universities, and other organizations where young people are, something will definitely grow. And that something turned out to be fascism. Senator Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign marked the first time he openly called himself a democratic socialist. Well, just a reminder. So there are National Socialists. Those are fascists. There are International Socialists. Those are communists. And these call themselves Democratic Socialists. But no matter how you arrange yourselves, as the saying goes, you're still no good. For us, you are absolutely not suitable. So, nevertheless, now Bernie Sanders being a brilliant orator, I must admit, an absolutely brilliant orator. He speaks amazingly. I mean, he kind of says nothing, but then you get the feeling that he said some kind of truth. Well, they say Trotsky was similar to him in this sense, right? So during his campaign, Sanders kind of mobilized the youth. He reached young people with his speeches. And millions of Americans, especially young people, wanted to take part in this, in something that felt right or righteous. We didn't understand much, but he sounded right. He talked about getting something we didn't earn, like oil, which belongs to someone else. But it would end up with us anyway, so it's fair. To this, of course, was added Trump's victory in the elections that same year, which mobilized the protest electorate on the left. So, in summary, DSA membership grew from, there were about 6,000 across the whole country in 2015. And as of today, I don't remember exactly how many there are now. They have about 100,000 members now. And out of those, they have 199 branches all over the country. There are 34 organizational committees or something like that, and that's almost all over America. I think 47 out of 50 states have DSA organizations. Only in Alaska. It's too cold for them there. That's why there's none. Their organization, this DSA, is not structured like a regular party. It's more like a decentralized network. Well, like ISIS, right? It was decentralized. Organized. Like in Iran, what's it called there? The core. Yes, it's organized according to the same principle. Decentralized. Local branches and internal ideological movements have significant autonomy. The largest branch is New York. There, I think there are 14,000 members. At least that was the case at the time of Mamdani's election. It is followed by Los Angeles, of course, with about 5,000 members. Washington has 3,000. Well, inside the DSA, there has been a debate for decades between the left wing, which says we need to break away from the Democratic Party and build a revolutionary strategy, and the right wing, which says we need to blow up the Democratic Party from the inside. So this kind of flexible electoral policy, which has started to work now because they are acting within the party, is what has brought results. Now, regarding funding, there were a lot of questions about this. The right always accused the DSA of being funded by big money, specifically George Soros. The conservative Monolithic Center, the Manhattan Institute, published an article in its city journal titled, "DSA is following Soros's plan." This is the critic's position, not an established fact. Basically, there is no confirmed financial reporting on this. Honestly, I should say that whatever Soros gives to someone goes through 3, 4, 15, 28 hands, so it's very hard to trace. Publicly available data paints a different picture. DSA describes its growth as the result of membership dues. Everyone says that. That is, it's not just them. Any movement says, we're not sitting on someone else's money. We're not sponsored by some billionaire. Our members are the ones giving us money. So maybe it's true, maybe it's not. That's what you'd call 50-50. Maybe yes, maybe no, maybe yes, maybe no. A good example, by the way, is the Malat Kiros campaign in Denver, which, with the help of the local DSA chapter, gathered more than 1,000, how many was it? About 6,500 volunteers. 6,500 volunteers is a lot, gentlemen. They knocked on over 100,000 doors and made 500,000 calls to voters. This is a classic model of grassroots field organization, not a top-down funded operation. That doesn't mean the funding issue is settled, as you can imagine. Maybe the Chinese are pitching in, maybe it's coming from somewhere else, maybe even from Iran, but since they have this kind of structure with many different branches, there's absolutely no transparency, zero. Nevertheless, it's quite difficult to claim that they're coordinated by some kind of foreign funding. Now then, what happened in 1926? The year 1926 became a year of significant progress for the DSA. According to data from early July, candidates supported by the DSA won in 35 primaries. That is, primaries are within the party, right? There were a total of 150, and out of those they put forward 150 people and won in 35. So, in my opinion, that's 34 losses. The rest haven't been counted yet. There were some very significant key victories. Here's Mayor Zohran Mamdani, the mayor of New York, and someone like Malat Kiros. She's 29 years old, won in Denver, and that's probably one of the most high-profile defeats of an incumbent politician. Daria Liza Avila, I've already talked about her, that's also in New York, running for Congress. Claire Valdez won in the primaries, also in New York. Well, and there are all sorts of local victories registered in Oregon, California, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, and I don't remember the rest. Well, mayors in New York, of course, yes. Overall, DSA currently holds about 250 elected positions. It's not a huge number yet, but it's a breakthrough. At the local level across the country, this includes 96 members of city councils and county commissions, as well as 8 mayors and county executives. Again, it's not a lot, but it's a lot compared to what it used to be. A year ago, DSA had 2 members in Congress, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Rashida Tlaib. Tlaib, not Talib, but Tlaib. After the current cycle, if everything goes as they expect, there will be 5 people in Congress. And going from 2 to 5 is significant. It's symbolic that the New York branch of the DSA ran 10 races in this cycle and won 9. It's practically a complete takeover of the local political machine in the area with the highest concentration of members. Do you realize that they've practically taken over the New York Democratic Party, so to speak? The program is electoral logic, so they have universal government health care, which means take money from the population and use it to treat everyone else. Affordable housing, again, it's all the same, right? That is, build it no matter how much it costs. The point is not to recoup the investment, but just so people can live there. But obviously there won't be enough, and once again, those who work will end up being robbed. Now, raising taxes on the rich is natural, and there's also this kind of anti-Semitic rhetoric, anti-political, anti-Palestinian. Pro-Palestinian, anti-Semitic, anti-Israeli. Santa Francia explains the successes like this. Progressives and democratic socialists are winning elections because the overwhelming majority of Americans understand that the political status quo isn't working. Well, that's nonsense. Absolute, 100% complete nonsense. DSA organizers emphasize that they vote for policies, not for a label. It's more about the policies than the label, said someone who seemed to be a representative of the company Kairos. The established electoral coalition, according to the Washington Post, consists mainly of young, educated voters, often with a university degree, united around specific material issues. They need their rent not to be raised, they need housing, they need health care to be paid for, and they need to be paid salaries. Not in line with what they can actually earn or receive, but as much as they would like for what they call a normal life. So it's not really an ideological brand of socialism, right? It's purely pragmatic. I just want to be given things, period. This is the main slogan, the main takeaway you can get from their victories. I want it, I don't care where you get it from, I deserve it, I'm entitled to it, period. And the second thing, as always, is why does he have it and I don't, and so on. Now, why in fact did the Democratic Party turn out to be vulnerable? The structural vulnerability of the Democratic Party to the DSA is not accidental, but is kind of built into the very architecture of the American two-party system. The DSA doesn't create its own party, like it would be in Europe, in Israel, or somewhere else, right? Instead, the organization systematically wins in the Democratic primaries. It doesn't need to beat the party establishment as a whole. It's enough to outmaneuver vulnerable or unprepared incumbent politicians, district by district. Now, the party leadership, they can only warn, but they can't stop the process. And Democratic strategists like El Motor, for example, a well-known person, say, we need centrists to win at the national level. That is, in other words, within the party, you can win based on the fact that you're, say, a Democratic forward type. Cut everyone, kill everyone, take everything from everyone, throw everyone out, right? As soon as you go to the general election with that slogan, because, as I said, that's for within the party, right? It turns out that nobody wants to vote for you except your most fanatical party members. Not even all of them, just some of your party members. And he also said, I think that some of the positions that these new socialists have come out with are so extreme that they will be rejected when we reach the general national level, which is exactly what will happen in 1928. They believe there will be no impact in 1926 since people aren't aware yet, but by 1928 everyone will understand. Nevertheless, these warnings are not stopping victories in local elections so far. Now that means local concentration. And what does it give you when you have a lot of members in a certain area? It gives you victory, it gives you control. Where the membership of this DSA is concentrated, well, like New York, for example, right? The Day-Day-Pact organization takes over the party infrastructure from the bottom up because they all come, they shout, they demand, they are heard, and those in the middle, well, there will be this one, there will be that one, someone might not be there, but these ones are all together. That's why these maybe 5 or 10% overpower the remaining inert 80 or 90% of the party members. But their ambitions, or as they used to say in Russia, theirs, yes, so their representatives, they're kind of ambitious, and they intend to go further. The leaders of the DSS openly talk about a competitive campaign for the White House in the year 2028, and they are discussing a formal split in the Democratic Party to act as an independent bloc in Congress. So far, only the logistics of such a split are holding them back. Well, I'll tell you right away, Lenin also once had a tiny faction among these so-called Bolsheviks. I don't remember how many people there were, but look at how much trouble they caused. Now, this part of the population, the ones who vote for them, is incredibly anti-Semitic. I mean, basically just they call it something else, like anti-Israel, anti-Zionist, and so on. In reality, it's pure anti-Semitism. That's a documented fact. The DSS officially endorsed the BDS movement, boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel. Back in 2017 and at the 21st Congress, support for Palestine was included in the organization's first political platform. They don't support anything in Africa or in Asia. We will specifically support Palestine. Yes, with the Palestinian struggle against apartheid, colonialism, and military occupation. But how can you occupy your own part of your territory, Israel? Well, you can if someone just calls it by another name, some other name. For example, Palestine. It's like, let's say, saying, well, just imagine, right? In New York, the Bronx is known as Iceburn. It's occupied because you didn't call it the Bronx, but Schmalestina. And immediately it turns out that this is the state of Schmalestina, which is occupied by New York or America. The case of Jamal Bowman. Jamal Bowman, a congressman from the Bronx with a good simple American name, from Westchester, a member of the DSA, who won the primary against longtime pro-Israel Congressman Eliot Engel. This was in 2020, and it became a testing ground for this conflict. In November 2021, Bowman traveled to Israel with a delegation from a liberal pro-Israel group, met with Prime Minister Naftali Bennett, and before that voted for additional funding for the Israeli system, meaning the Iron Dome. And immediately, several DSA chapters demanded his complete expulsion from the organization, to kick him out, or whatever, I don't know. To roll him in something, wrap him up, throw him out, burn him, I don't know. The DSA National Political Committee decided to expel him, but then at the last moment decided not to expel him, but announced that they would not support Bowman in the 2022 elections. Well, they got scared that he would join another organization if he didn't show solidarity with Palestine. So basically, they gave him a loophole like, we won't kick you out if you show solidarity. And yes, they added, in accordance with the expectations we've set, meaning you shouldn't have your own opinion. Vasya, we've set the rules, so just follow them. The vice chairman of the DSA Educational Fund, David DeWalt, called what was happening an erosion of democratic norms and pointed out the lack of an option to expel him. On the other hand, the DSA Palestine Working Group stated directly, "We recognize the threat that Bowman and other members pose to the Zionist lobby." Do you understand anything? In 2024, Bowman moved even further to the left. Well, on the issue of Israel, he started supporting BDS. Well, he didn't want to ruin relationships with his comrades and decided, well, I don't care about my own opinion. Who cares, right? And after October 7, he sharply criticized Israel, accusing it of genocide in Gaza. That's normal, huh? This cost him the support of many Jewish voters in the district, and in the summer of 2024, he lost. Naturally. George Latimer won against him by more than 11 points, and the pro-Israel lobby, including AIPAC, invested a significant amount in the campaign against him, gentlemen. So Bowman talked about $20 million in dark money. Well, obviously he exaggerated since it was actually 158, right? Besides, the money wasn't dark, but he wanted to explain his loss not by his vile anti-Semitic position, but simply by saying there were bad people involved, right? Who decided to bribe the voters. Turns out voters can be bribed. How interesting. Right-wing and pro-Israel journalism put it bluntly. The Daily Beast, in an article about Bowman's defeat, wrote that the DSA did everything possible to stir up hatred against Jews, turning him into a litmus test within the movement, and described what was happening as hatred, a slow pogrom coming from the radical left. Well, there was no pogrom. I also don't like it when that side shouts fascism, and I don't like it when this side shouts pogrom. And now let's return to today, Mamdani's speech and the contrast with Trump. On July 3rd, the day before the 250th anniversary of the United States, New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani delivered a keynote speech from City Hall sitting at a desk that, according to legend, was used by George Washington, surrounded by 10 recently naturalized citizens holding American flags. So these same citizens, of course, when they're out on the streets, they're not carrying American flags, as we've seen, but some are carrying Palestinian flags, some Mexican, and others something else. But when they came there, they were each given a small American flag, and they say, "Oh, this is the American flag." But they waved them with smiles. The timing of the event, just a few hours before Trump's speech at Mount Rushmore, was chosen deliberately as outright counter-programming. Like, with this very thing, we're going to hit them with this, with the armored train or whatever. Mamdani, himself a naturalized citizen who came to the U.S. from Uganda, a good place to come to the U.S. from, at the age of 7, never mentioned Trump by name, but his speech was critical of immigration policy, towards the government's immigration policy. Key statements? He talked about masked agents terrorizing our streets, but he forgot to mention that these agents are catching murderers, rapists, terrorists, and so on. These agents are eating food prepared by our undocumented neighbors, illegal immigrant. So an illegal immigrant is an undocumented neighbor. Before secretly taking them away in unmarked vans, he confused the USSR again. He confused the USSR with America again. So there are lots of emotions, lots of vague accusations and bitter words about how their people, who crossed the border without permission but made it through, are now being oppressed by these American monsters according to the laws of the country they so dreamed of entering. They're not the oppressors, but those who entered and are now oppressed. So the fact that millions of people are trying to get into America and no one wants to run away from America is of course proof that America is terrible. And all the other countries that people are fleeing from but no one wants to go to, they must be very good. For example, Uganda or Somalia, or for instance, Belarus, or for example, North Korea. All of them are very good. And when these good people break our law and we try to punish them for it, then we are very bad. Does any of this make sense to you? I mean, I understand. Yes, I understand. I don't even want to say what. He, yes, accused influential people of turning America into an arena of supremacy. Well, that's right. Everyone is trying to come here and no one wants to leave. If freedom is only for a select few, why are millions rushing here? Can I tell you? And he called Americans' view on immigration and immigrants petty, weak, and unoriginal. That's right, our view is unoriginal. We don't want illegals here. We only want legal ones here, the ones we've checked. And not even all of them. He, so to speak, redefined patriotism as the right to disagree. So if he disagrees with the government and resists it, like, yes, there's a law, but I don't agree with this law, that's what patriotism is. Well, maybe you don't agree, so go and change it. No. Why? We'll just not follow it. And he concluded with the thesis that the country's fundamental ideals are strong enough to survive any authoritarian regime, but only if we strive for them. Huh? What? The context of the speech is telling. It came right after a series of victories by candidates supported by Mamdani at the New York primaries, also called the primaries. Last week, by the way, the Supreme Court upheld birthright citizenship. This decision, it didn't exactly confirm it. It just didn't allow it to be changed on the grounds Trump proposed and suggested a different way to do it. In other words, the opposite. The court was saying, you can do it, but in a different way. But nevertheless, they believe that this means Trump got slapped in the face. Trump's speech on the same day was of a completely opposite nature. The president spoke about pride in the country's history, warned against the communist threat, which according to him poses a fundamental danger to constitutional values and the founding spirit of the nation. McCarthy said this. All the same things. But we were lied to about him. They made him out to be a completely nightmarish figure, right? He said all the same things. He said, guys, don't let the communists take over this country. Thus, July 3rd and 4th, 2026 became the moment of a public, symbolically staged duel between two visions of America on its 250th anniversary. From both sides with an absolutely unambiguous message. Well, what interests us most is what this means for November 2026 and accordingly November 2028. The Democratic Party itself is divided. Moderate Democrats have feared for years that the success of candidates associated with the DSA, socialism, fascism, or communism, yes, they even managed to have one candidate. They chose a candidate who had, something on his chest, I don't remember now, or on his arm. It was probably a death's head, the very same one from the SS division. Well, I mean, good grief. You can just go crazy because of them, honestly. In general, as they fear, this could turn into a vulnerability in general elections in competitive districts. It will push away undecided voters, and it will become public, affecting the party's public image in a way that's beneficial to the Republicans. And I think so too. I absolutely agree with them, and I'm very glad about it. I'm serious, I'm really glad about it. Republicans, in turn, consistently try to showcase the Democratic primary, using the victories of socialists as proof that the whole party has shifted to the left, which is true. On the contrary, it's not that some of them have shifted to the left. No, they haven't shifted to the left. And those who felt that, as they say, the ground was slipping out from under them started shouting, "We're not socialists, we're capitalists. We're capitalists, but the Democratic Party ignores them." So this time, the Republicans will have a great opportunity to quote the speeches and statements made or written by those elected by the Democrats. So it's for the young jackals to fight for Congress. The DSA leaders themselves don't hide the fact that they see the Republican midterms only as a stage. The goal is on the horizon, 2028. In their own words, a competitive campaign for the White House. Who do they mean? Well, probably Ocasio-Cortez. God knows. Who else, right? Well, not that crazy Rashida, right? I mean, she's not just crazy, she's mentally unstable. Whether this remains just an ambition or becomes a reality will depend on whether the DSA candidates can repeat their success outside the urban Democratic strongholds in competitive districts in Florida, Wisconsin, and other states, when the organization is already, well, their organization is already investing serious money. And again, they say that all this comes from our contributions. Well, it's kind of hard to understand that, right? What the hell kind of contributions? Someone is giving them a ton of money. From my point of view, that's absolutely great. I want to see a miner. First of all, well, a miner in Minnesota who votes for his money to be taken away and given to illegal immigrants. Or I want to see a police officer in the state of Wisconsin who votes to abolish the police. Or a farmer in the state of Iowa who wants to be told at what price he should sell his products at the market. And if he overcharges, if he does something the government doesn't like, then his farm will be confiscated. And they throw him out of his house. This is roughly the story and the explanation of what will really happen if these stinking fascists take power in our country. But it's time to get back to our main topic. As they say, we've shouted, we've rejoiced, we've hissed, we've traded irony, we've been sarcastic. Let's move on to the favorite of women and waiters, our sweet and delightful heir to the Getty Pelosi Newsom family business, Svetozar, old Gavin. As we now know, the case of Gavin Newsom and his other wife has come up. Yes, I know that people don't say his other. I know. Please don't write that in the comments. I want to say his other, her other, and their other, and I will. All of this came up even before Trump ended up in the White House. So the ministry and the portfolio, I could talk about them if I want to. The Department of Justice charged Dana Williamson, who was the former chief of staff for Newsom, on November 12, 1925, exactly. In November, I remember. Yes. The indictment includes 23 counts, including notable ones: conspiracy to commit bank and wire fraud, interestingly, false tax returns, and lying to the FBI. Well, you can of course file false returns, but you shouldn't lie or run from the FBI. According to the prosecution, from February 1922 to September 1924, Williamson, together with accomplices, stole about $225,000 from an inactive, so to speak, campaign account. So people donated for the election, and instead of spending it or returning it or whatever the law requires, they just took the money. He disguised them as constitutional provisions. Try that in your own business and you'll get caught. Then what? Oh, that won't end well. Prosecutors also claim that she reported over $1.7 million. That's a bit more serious, right? Of fictitious business expenses on her tax returns. But what did she actually spend? What did she report? The girl traveled a lot, just traveled, right? I'm not even saying she, I don't know, used champagne just to pour it into the bathtub and bathe in it, right? How? Other jerks who got caught did it. Maybe she did something else, but spending $1.7 million on business travel expenses is no joke. That's it. In May 2026, Williamson pleaded guilty to charges of conspiracy to commit bank wire fraud, filing a false tax return, and lying to the FBI. This is prosecuted very seriously here. For some reason, you can lie to anyone but the FBI. The sentence hasn't been handed down yet. Honestly, I haven't checked yet in socialist America. Maybe, God forbid, there will be a chance to find out. And then it will turn out that you can spend $1.6, $1.7 million on business trips. So, now the Department of Justice has charged this Dana. She was the chief of staff for Newsom, no more, no less, right? November 12, 2025, as I already mentioned, the indictment. And where did all this come from? Where did all this pop up from, right? It's very simple. Back when Biden was in office, they recruited a woman who was one of the members of the so-called inner circle. There, and a lobbyist, she wore a wire and went to all the meetings for a year and a half, to every meeting with this microphone. And Alexis Podesta, that was her name. She is a longtime influential, as they call it, player, a lobbyist who held positions under Newsom and Jerry Brown, and whom Newsom himself appointed to the board of the State Insurance Fund. Since 2020, she wore a wire for the FBI, starting from, I think, June 24th, according to attorney Williamson. So Scott, McGregory Scott, he is a former federal prosecutor and something like that. He let it slip, said something like, "She wore a wire, but my client didn't." Well, she didn't. In the court documents, Podesta is listed as accomplice number 2, meaning she got caught, really caught, but no charges were brought against her because she gave up everyone she could. Her lawyer confirmed that she, yes, cooperated with the investigation. Yes, she is cooperating. One of the recorded conversations is mentioned in the plea agreement. Wills, that is, Williamson, recorded how she, both Williamson and Podesta, discussed a strategy for responding to a request under the public records law, which was related to the court case in California. Moreover, Williamson freely shared information that was confidential government information and absolutely prohibited from being disclosed. They freely discussed it over the phone with anyone. They shared everything. They didn't care about anything at all. They signed agreements not to disclose information and immediately disclosed it. They signed agreements not to leak information and immediately leaked it. They're not held accountable because they think they're above others, though occasionally someone is punished. But guys, this isn't just some small-time lackey. They're going to get a real sentence now. You know, something like 2 to 15 years, maybe they'll have to return $2 million and so on and so on. But when they mention the numbers themselves, it means they won't actually demand those numbers. Maybe they'll have to return it with some kind of penalty, with interest, right? This is a serious person they've caught, you understand, and it's not the first time. But first they catch a small fish, then use it to catch a medium fish, and when they catch the medium fish, they say, "We'll reduce your sentence from 10 to 2 years now, give us someone higher up." The investigation turned out to be very broad in scope. Last fall, the FBI sent a letter to a number of insiders and lobbyists in Sacramento, including, by the way, a couple of Republicans. He claims that he never communicated with Podesta or Guillams, and the notice was simply to inform them that, "Gentlemen, during a certain period, we intercepted your calls as part of the investigation, just so you are aware." This broad scope is explained by the fact that Podesta was bugged. Everything, not just what she wanted to pass on, but everything that was happening, the FBI knew about. But at first it was the Biden-era FBI, and it was moving in a certain direction. And then Trump's people came in, and now they've sorted through everything that was recorded there. Oh, how interesting. There you go. Actually, Podesta was a well-known person. She had contacts with many figures in the political class of Sacramento, including Republicans as well. The wiretapping of her calls also affected people who had no direct connection, but nevertheless with whom they discussed things that shouldn't have been done, let's say. Yes, first they talked, and then they acted. Newsom himself and his wife are now under a separate investigation. Last month, Newsom stated that he and Jennifer, his wife, are subjects of a federal investigation. Well, in other words, they've got them. They haven't been caught yet, but they're already closing in on them. According to media reports, investigators are also looking into nonprofit organizations connected to the state's First Lady. Well, excuse me, so to speak, yes, I'll say it, I'll share my assumption. She's a thief, that's what I assume, who has already faced criticism from conservative observers for corporate donations and potential conflicts of interest. Of course, she's not on the same level as the oligarchs like the Ukrainian or Russian ones, or say Hillary Clinton, but she hasn't reached that level yet. She hasn't gotten there yet. If she grew a bit more, then the billions would start coming in. Newsom publicly accused the Justice Department and the Trump administration of organizing a politically motivated investigation against him, calling it revenge and hinting that he's being persecuted because of a possible run in the 2028 presidential election. As for guilt, he says, what guilt? There's no guilt at all, it's just slander for no reason. And there was no bug on Podesta, no. The timeline undermines Newsom's version about revenge. I mean, yes, Podesta was already wearing a wire in June 2024, a year and a half before Trump's return to the White House, but he couldn't have set up that wiretap against Newsom. Not even assuming, are you still assuming, that he will be president again, right? Okay. Now, the actual indictment against Williamson was announced by the outgoing Biden administration at the end of 25, so again, it has nothing to do with Trump. And the whistleblower, the wiretapping, and the initial charges, all of that came up before there was any window for the operation, which Trump could have organized. Whatever role the Trump Justice Department is playing in this case now, it's about continuing an already existing federal case, not creating one. Well, of course, they latched onto it with both hands, with all four, really. Republican commentators and publications seized on this story as proof that Newsom's version of a witch hunt. Again, once more, the witches are the Democrats. In this case, it's false, specifically pointing to the chronology of the Biden era. Newsom kept Podesta in a paid position on the state council, pretending that he wasn't taking any revenge on her at all. She was only getting $68,000 there. I think that's just small change. That kind of money could change hands in a day, in an hour. This is a real ongoing federal corruption case. Very timely. Very timely. I really think Trump was holding back his prosecutors so they wouldn't bring it out too early. So it has nothing to do with us. I'll plant the bug before we arrive. Well, now, gentlemen, it's time for the cherry on top. If there's a cherry, that means there's a cake. That's an almost 100% claim. In New York's Central Park, for the first time in over 10 years, the thermometer crossed the 100-degree Fahrenheit mark. That's 38 Celsius. At the same time, it felt like 112 degrees, which is 44 Celsius. Around 5,000 residents of the Bronx were left without electricity. The energy company Con Edison had warned about the risk of outages at peak load on the grid. Against this backdrop, New York City Mayor Zachron Mandeli issued an address to the residents. It's hot, and the power grid is working at its limit to keep us cool. Set your air conditioner to 78 degrees. That's 26 degrees Celsius. That's hot. Turn off the lights and appliances you're not using. Unplug everything you can. He claimed that the City Hall is setting an example. Supposedly, they maintain the same standard of 78 degrees in all municipal buildings. They dim the lights during peak hours and ask private partners to do the same. The official reasoning is to reduce the load on the grid to avoid widespread outages and not put at risk the lives of people who depend on air conditioners for medical reasons. The post received 36.5 million views. But not because people were looking for energy-saving tips. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis made a sarcastic remark. So that's what was meant by the warmth of collectivism. It's a reference to Mamdani's own rhetoric about replacing the coldness of wild individualism with the warmth of collectivism. Mamdani said this. Now the governor of Kansas, Sarah Huckabee, a person with a sense of humor, wrote, "It turns out socialism isn't free at all." Vivek Ramaswamy, remember him? He called it, "This is exactly what socialism looks like." And he suggested an alternative, drilling, fracking, coal, nuclear. And David Portnoy wrote, 78 degrees, welcome to communism. Enjoy. But the real blow didn't come from critics, but from journalists. The New York Post newspaper. They came with an infrared thermometer to a bunch of rooms in City Hall. They checked 20 spots. In at least 15 of them, it was much lower than 78 degrees, the ones Mamdani was talking about, saying that we suffer too. I gave the order. Well, and so on. How much less? Maybe by 1 degree, right? The City Hall rotunda showed not 78, but 64 degrees. That's 18 Celsius. So it's cool. The press office room on the first floor is already 62 degrees. Even cooler. The record is the air conditioner in the press service radio room, 54 degrees. That's 12 degrees Celsius. It's just freezing as hell. Like in a refrigerator. And that was the very day when the temperature in Central Park went over 100 Fahrenheit. And thousands of Bronx residents were left without electricity at all. This story became a classic example, a call to make sacrifices for the common good. And who is making the call? Those who are comfortable at that time. It's the rhetoric that usually causes the most irritation among the public, regardless of political views. Remember well, let's not mention him by name, Parisnov, Gavin Newsom, who gave a half-hour speech that was broadcast all over America, saying that civic duty meant staying at home and not going to restaurants. Well, if you do go somewhere, it's necessary. That's it. If you're with 2 or 3 people, don't interact with anyone else. Wear masks, take off your mask, put a piece of food in your mouth, put your mask back on, and chew. Exactly half an hour after he gave this speech, he was found, spotted by journalists, and filmed from several cameras. 12 people in a restaurant, a fancy restaurant where a dish costs $300, $350, as they say. None of them are wearing masks. Everyone is talking, laughing, hugging, chatting. I don't know, maybe even kissing and so on. Or Nancy Pelosi. Well, actually, she's not really his aunt, but that's what they call her. She's his first cousin once removed. She was calling for the same thing, kept insisting, and then, well, she was found in a beauty salon where she had gone. She walked in, took off her mask, set it aside, and stayed about 2.5 hours. Many people were around. No one wore masks. That's how it was. Same old thing. So here's the thing. That's what causes the most irritation. And do you remember the old joke I mentioned? I'm sure you do, right? What if we build socialism in the Sahara Desert? The answer never gets old. Very soon there will be a shortage of sand in the Sahara. The logic is simple and universal for any planned economy. It doesn't matter how rich the region is in resources. If distribution is handled not by the market, but by a centralized plan, shortages appear even where there is theoretically an infinite amount of raw materials. That's because that's how socialism works. In Cuba, in Venezuela, in North Korea, and in all other places around the world where it is practiced. And we want this in New York, we want this in Washington, in Los Angeles, all over the entire territory. We want Venezuela in the USA, damn it. It's the classic model. It's not about the availability of resources, but about the system of incentives. Socialism knows how to create shortages, even in places where it would seem shortages should be simply impossible. Well, Venezuela is the same, right? That's our cherry on top. Let's part on this note, ladies and gentlemen, until the next terribly interesting developments. But before that, if you want to understand a bit deeper why socialism does this, and why capitalism does the exact opposite, right? Then I have a second channel called Roadmap to Freedom. Subscribe, check it out. And also on this, what's it called, Telegram, right? I created a channel that's named just like this channel, so Leon Weinstein US. Go there, subscribe. I share all sorts of things there. Well, just now it was long and lengthy. How long was it? About 35 minutes, probably. Maybe the story even ended up being 40 minutes. But there are also some short things which, when they come to mind, I post there. That's all. Goodbye for now. And once again, have an amazing holiday. Happy absolute Independence Day to you.